All aboard! Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, football fans of all ages, I am Beast Mike, and you have now arrived at my train of thought. It's also time to ask the question, where do we go from here? Now, this first stop is going to take us to Washington, D.C. From there, it's a bit of a train ride, and then it's a 20-minute walk from the train station to get to FedEx Field in Landover, Maryland, where the Commanders play. I know this because I've done this. I did this for the Dolphins-Commanders game. As a Dolphins fan, I enjoyed it. It was basically a home game for all of us. Yes, the Commanders and Josh Harris got the ticket revenue and all the other stuff and whatnot, but it was a home game for the Dolphins. Let's keep it a buck. And Miami handled business and treated it as such. But talking with Commander fans during this game, and I kind of got the sense that, yes, they understood they were going to take a beating in this game from a far superior Dolphin team, but they kind of had a little bit of hope in the sense of they knew that they were going to draft high with this loss and various others. They had 8 straight to end the season, and that they were going to be able to, A, rebuild their offensive line, or B, decide their QB in the future. Now, I don't think any of them thought they would pick as high as they are, but I got the sense that they were okay with it. And to be honest, considering where that roster and that franchise has been over the last 20 years, I can live with it in their shoes. I think they would gladly take this situation than being mediocre with Dan Snyder like they were going into this offseason last year. And with that, let's look at the Commanders a little bit. I thought Sam Howell was going to set the sack record. It was looking really bad for, I would say, the first 15 weeks of the season. I guess going into week 16, if you will. It was looking real rough. And he only got sacked 65 times. I say only because I thought he was going to be in the 70s and maybe even 80s had he played all 17 games all the way through. There were games where he was benched. Jacoby Brissett did get in a few games. He got into 3 of them. And I think it saved Sam Howell from setting the record. Although with the 21 NOs and the 21 touchdowns, it did kind of give me vibes of he might just throw a pick 6 just as well as throw a touchdown to his own guys. He did throw several of them. I saw one of them live, the Benjamin Ginkle pick 6. It also felt kind of weird to see regression almost completely across the board from all the general targets that the Commanders have. And I like all their players. I like their skill guys. Terry McLaurin did have 1,000 yards, but it seemed like he kind of regressed a little bit. Jahan Dotson played all 17 games. He didn't as a rookie. He played all 17 games this time. He barely got over 500 yards. Curtis Samuel got over 600 yards. And he did play 16 of the 17, which is fine. Logan Thomas, who's had some health issues, didn't get to 500 yards. All those guys had 4 touchdowns apiece. And for that matter, so did Brian Robinson Jr., who I really do like as a running back. Antonio Gibson falling off the face of the earth is really surprising in this system. I thought he'd be better. Anyway, I do think they will be a little bit better going forward with Dan Quinn on that defense, because that defense was really bad. They were the worst, and they were the worst defense in the league, and they have only a couple dudes that you can say, all right, we can build for the future with here. I like Jamin Davis, and I think he's going to be very good. But obviously, the 2 guys up front, Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne, are excellent D tackles. It just doesn't seem like they have too much help otherwise. Emmanuel Forbes, I think, will eventually get it. I think he'll eventually be fine. But for now, it's just not there quite yet for him. He did get his first career in, though. That's always nice. The Commanders were the only team to give up 500 points this past season. That's kind of an indicator of how bad this defensive unit really was. They were awful. Which kind of explains why Dan Quinn's the head coach now. Quinn, as we saw over the years, was really good in Dallas. Now, he went out with a thud, but he was really good in Dallas with a very talented defense. In time, I think Dan Quinn will be able to build up the defense he chooses, and I think Washington will look better at it eventually. Maybe not yet, but eventually. Offensively speaking, I am a little surprised Eric Bieniemy's not there anymore. Cliff Kingsbury being there, I think is going to be very interesting. I think he's going to provide something that they need in terms of offensive play calling. Not that I don't like Bieniemy. I think Bieniemy is a good play caller. I'm just surprised that he didn't really get a shot at becoming the head coach and replacing Ron Rivera. It was time for Rivera and Jack Del Rio especially to go. It just wasn't working in Washington. Things were getting stagnant, if not worse, and then obviously by the statistics I kind of just talked about, it got far worse from 22 to 23, and it was time to move forward. So I understood that. It's just surprising that Bieniemy didn't get a shot at the head coaching spot that now Dan Quinn holds. The Commanders have quite a few free agents, and some of them are truly notable. For instance, I mentioned Jacoby Brissett played in a few games, and he actually looked respectable in said games. He is a free agent, and I think he could still be a serviceable stopgap type of QB in the right place whenever there's like a QB injury. Certainly a good backup. He is a free agent. Kendall Fuller, who's the Commanders' best corner and one of their better defensive players, he is also a free agent. I think Curtis Samuel can still get it done as a receiver. He seems like a pretty good all-purpose type of cat. He is a free agent and can test the market, and so can former Pro Bowler from the special teams side of things, Jeremy Reeves. I'd like to think they'll keep Reeves, but he's made himself a very good commodity when it comes to special teams. Antonio Gibson also being a free agent, it felt like they kind of phased him out last season in Washington. He didn't get the opportunities he feels like he normally gets, and did some kick returning for them last year for the Commanders. Maybe he needs to go and find a place elsewhere. We'll see what happens with him. Either way, Washington's got plenty of resources that they can really replenish their team with ASAP. They have the most cap room in the league at $82.2 million left to spend on their roster, so they can really go to work and really rebuild things immediately. Also, because of this 8-game losing streak and the mega tank that they went on the last 2 months, they have the second pick in the draft. They obviously have the second pick they have pick 36 in round 2, which is effectively the third pick, but that's all right. It works all the same. But they have pick 40 with the Bears thanks to the Montez Sweat trade. You would think they're going to get a pass rusher or one of those 2 second-round picks. And then they have the compensatory pick from the Chase Young trade. So that's pick 100. They have 5 picks in the first 100 and effectively 6 picks in the first 102. Washington, I think, could really go to work here with those picks. They have 3 others, which include rounds 5 through 7 picks of their own. They actually have all of their own picks, plus those 2 picks they got in their edge rusher trades. Washington can rebuild things fairly quickly. I don't know if they are a contender immediately, but they figuratively have a choice to make between Drake May and Jalen Daniels. And then from there, maybe they rebuild their pass rush, maybe they rebuild their defense. I'd like to think the Commanders won't be as bad as they were to end last season. Go up in alphabetical order, and we're still going to go south in terms of direction and head to Nashville, where the Titans are playing. Who would have thought? In this particular video, I would cover the last 2 teams in alphabetical order. Who knew? But Tennessee is another interesting case. The Titans are a team that I think needed to bottom out. I think they needed to plummet and just replenish their pool and end up with just some more talent, some more speed on their roster. And just watching Tennessee play, it just felt like they were kind of a 1990s style team, or at least they tried to be, with King Henry. They were so dependent on him, and yes, King Henry's still really good. It just felt like, aside from him, what else were they really going, and DeAndre Hopkins too, aside from DeAndre Hopkins as well, what else were they really going to do in terms of their offensive production? Perfect example. King Henry had 1,100 yards, 1,167 yards to be exact. Everybody else had barely under 700 as a whole. That's to be expected. I do like Tajay Spears, but other than those 2 guys, nobody else had over 75 rushing yards for the season. It was a bit concerning. When Henry wasn't running the ball, maybe Tajay Spears wasn't catching it out of the backfield. It just wasn't that great. I do like DeAndre Hopkins with how they used him. They used him later on in the season much more, and he got over 1,000 yards, and he looked pretty good. He really did. And DeAndre Hopkins, I think, still has a whole lot of game left in him. Whether it's in Nashville, we will see. Chigoziem Okonkwo proved to be a pretty solid tight end. He was Tennessee's second best pass catcher in terms of yards. He only had 1 touchdown now. That's a little bit concerning. But he was a pretty productive receiver as well for Tennessee. He actually was their second best in terms of targets as well. Second most targeted. Tajay Spears was targeted 70 times, which is rather surprising. He also had 52 catches out of the backfield. So, yeah, Tyjae Spears is a pretty solid option to really throw the ball to in a pinch. He seemed to be the one true home run threat out of the backfield in terms of just pure speed. Obviously, King Henry brings the thunder, and then DeAndre Hopkins with overall skill will also do this. Will Levis. I do think there's some talent there. He seemed to be a decent passer, especially with the deep ball, and there were moments where Will Levis didn't seem shook. He didn't seem concerned or terrified of the pressure that was coming his way, and he looked all right. He looked great against the Falcons, and he looked really good in closing out and getting probably the biggest upset of the year when they beat the Dolphins. He had some good moments here. With Brian Callahan as the new head coach, and obviously he did really well with Joe Burrow in Cincinnati, I do think there is some possible hope here. Is Levis the QB of the future? I think time will tell there. But I don't think we're quite ready to say whether he is or he isn't yet. There are pieces to me on this defense. I've always liked their pass rush, especially the big three guys. Jeffrey Simmons, I know, only played 12 games, but he's always a really good defensive tackle. They took care of him. He's going to be there long term. He's one of the best D tackles in the game still. Howard Landry and Nico Autry, both guys played really well this year. Autry had 11.5 sacks. Landry had 10.5 sacks. Both those guys can still get it done and are still really good when it comes to getting home and getting to the quarterback. I like Shakir. I think Shakir is a very good tackler. How do I know this? Well, having 163 of them probably seems to work for Azeez Al-Shakir. I think he had a very good season in his own right, getting it done. I think the thing that I want to see Tennessee improve upon on this unit is just playmaking. They just don't seem to have enough playmakers on that side of the ball, and really on offense too, but on that side of the ball especially. Sean Murphy-Bunting led their team with 2 NOs. That's obviously not enough for a team that needs to get better and needs to try to keep up in the worst way with a quarterback division that includes Trevor Lawrence and Anthony Richardson and obviously CJ Stroud, who all were monsters at points in last season. This feels like it's the end of an era for Tennessee, and it kind of hurts to see the face of their franchise probably go, but I understand it for them. Derrick Henry is a free agent, and Tennessee's obviously rebuilding, so it feels like Henry's going to try to go get a ring, and I completely understand it on his end. He has been an excellent Titan. He's going to go to the Hall of Fame, and obviously we'll all think of him as a Tennessee Titan. He will probably latch on to a team that's a true contender and it just needs some thunder. You have Denico Autry, who I mentioned, who's had a very good career in Tennessee in his own right. He's a really good pass rusher. He had another big year. He too will cash in and become a very, very well-paid free agent. Shakir, who I just mentioned, had 163 tackles, and you need your linebackers to get busy when it comes to tackling guys. He too is a free agent. I'd like to think that Tennessee will try to keep a couple of these dudes. Sean Murphy-Bunting, I just mentioned, he had the team lead with the NOs. He is a free agent as well. So I would like to think that Tennessee would try to keep some of these dudes. They certainly have the resources to do it, though. The Titans are number 2 in the league. So I got the number 1 team in terms of cap space, and now the number 2 team in terms of cap space. They are $80.6 million under the cap for this offseason. So naturally, I'd like to think Tennessee is going to probably try to keep some of their main free agents and try to build around them. They are a really young team, though, at 25 and change. They are the 3rd youngest team in the league already, and that's with Henry and Autry and some of the other veterans on this team. Tennessee also has the 7th pick in the draft, and to me, this is going to be very interesting. What do they do with it? Do they go offensive line and try to bookend with another tackle with Peter Skoronski, or do they try to get some playmaking on defense? Yes, this is a really good offensive draft with a lot of offensive tackles and wide receivers worth getting, and the quarterbacks, not that I think they should draft one right away, but there's a lot of offensive talent here in this draft, and it feels like Tennessee needs to do that. And then rebuild the defense with some playmaking in round 2 with the 38th pick. They don't have a round 3 pick, but they do have picks in rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7. They have the round 5 pick from Minnesota, and they have the 2 round 7 picks, one from Carolina and one from Philadelphia. So that's where Tennessee's picks are. Not having the round 3 pick for their situation is not great, but I'd like to think that Tennessee's going to try to make some moves to acquire more picks. They're in need of kind of rebuilding, and it feels like they're going to need a couple of years to get everything in place so they can compete with all the top-tier potential QBs in the AFC South. So that's where Tennessee is, and that's where Washington is. Two teams that I think have plenty of resources to get good, but I'm not sure that they're going to be able to get good right away. I think they're both going to need another year to truly get right in divisions that are not the easiest to deal with. Speaking of Washington, one other division rival is going to be next up, the New York Giants. And the team that they're going to be paired with, ironically, is their neighbors, the New York Jets. Yep, we're going to go to New York, and we're going to go all over the boroughs when it comes to the next version of this series. That's where we'll go from here. You've now reached the final stop of my train of thought.